The Denver Broncos might have just unlocked the role for RJ Harvey where he can help the Broncos offense thrive all season long. We'll tell you what it is here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, where you know it's your team every day. Special thank you and a shout out to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. And if you're not yet an everydayer, become one for all your daily Broncos content coverage and more. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert over there, predominantlyorange.com. And we got a lot to break down here on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets that you can use all throughout the entire app. And what a follow-up show to a victory Tuesday, essentially, here as we now shift gears a little bit to the Philadelphia Eagles. But some grandstanding notes here from the Broncos after their Monday Night Football win. The Broncos seemingly have found out how to unlock RJ Harvey's usage a little bit further in Monday Night Football. We'll talk about that. Plus, we're going to ask the question, is it time for the Broncos to go in a different direction at the center position after Luke Wattenberg's struggles continue to impact the offense? And then we'll also discuss the standouts there on the offensive line. Garett, Bolles, Mike McGlinchey. These guys aren't being talked about enough. We'll highlight them and more on today's episode of the show. Sayre, my friend, look, I think Monday's game here, as we've had a chance to go back and watch the film, look at the numbers, and go through and see what exactly happened against the Bengals in primetime action. It seems like the Broncos might have the formula right here for unlocking a very, very impactful role for rookie running back RJ Harvey.
Well, Sean Payton said that they have yet to give RJ Harvey his Joker wings, but I think we might have seen finally the first step towards the Broncos giving him those Joker wings against the Bengals on Monday night. I know everybody's tired of the overplayed Joker term, so let's just talk about RJ Harvey as an offensive weapon then. Call it whatever you want to call it, but we saw the full kind of, I guess it was the full arsenal of what he brings to the table in this game, right? From just those quick feet, the great vision, the ability to make plays in space, soft hands as a receiver, a lot of different things going on as he racked up 98 yards from scrimmage in this game, Cody. But go figure, against the Chargers, only had 48 total plays offensively to work with. Get this, the Broncos had 80 total plays to work with against the Cincinnati Bengals offensively. So not only was it a great opportunity for this offense as a whole to get on track, but when you have 80 plays that you can run, man, you can really find ways to say, hey, we want to really get a good look at RJ Harvey. It almost functions as a preseason game in that regard. So you're able to not only get him involved in the offense the way you saw in terms of your vision pre-draft, now you're able to put some feet to that in a real game that matters and build up his confidence.
Well, not only that, it is the element in the pass catching department where if you look at his college tape, didn't have a lot of overall volume as a pass catcher, but in times where he was targeted out of the backfield, he had big plays that went for touchdowns. We're talking wheel routes, but now you're seeing RJ kind of evolve a little bit as a player where, okay, yes, he's catching a pass out in the flat and maybe he's doing damage getting upfield, but we're seeing him run downfield. Now, there was the one mishap there where Bo Nix went to go throw a little shot play to him and he kind of hesitated and stopped versus still going. If he would have kept going, that might have been a walking touchdown. And then he probably would have had over 100 all-purpose yards in this game. 98, is still pretty dang good. We'll take that. 4 catches for 40 yards. Had a chance to probably, if he would have caught that one and it would have been a touchdown, probably would have had over 100 yards receiving in this game and 2 potential receiving touchdowns overall. So I like the vision as to where they're evolving him as a pass catcher here. But I also like the split usage between these guys. Sayre, we can all probably acknowledge it, not every game. You're not going to get 80 snaps offensively every game, but if you can, you would sure like to take advantage of that. J.K. Dobbins had 36 snaps here for the Broncos offensively. RJ Harvey had 33. When we're talking about balance in terms of usage, I really like the rhythm and flow that Sean Payton had with both of these guys here, and I think it allowed them both to shine in their own ways. Right now, the Broncos might have their running back duo for the next foreseeable future here. I think these guys both have created impact plays here, and we saw that on Monday night.
Yeah, we really did. And these two guys working together, we called for kind of who's going to be that spark. It was thrown out there by some, like maybe Jaleel McLaughlin gets activated for this game and he becomes the spark like he was against the Bengals last year. Or do you give Tyler Bede some more run out there? I think I like what the Broncos did in sticking with these two guys. We saw last week against the Chargers, only 2 carries for 2 yards for RJ Harvey. But when you watch the game, you really understand, hey, he had one nice run that was called back on a penalty. And he also had a nice, a potential of a pass play that was drawn up for him to convert a 3rd and long that ultimately a couple of guys missed their blocks. So you had opportunities there. You're intentionally trying to get him involved. So stick with the plan. Don't necessarily need to throw a different guy out there and see if he can do it, because I do feel like you're exactly right, Cody. You have the 2 guys that you can build not only a running game around, but a dynamic overall offense around, because J.K. Dobbins, man, he's creating after contact. RJ Harvey is doing more than just catching swings and screens. Like, he's showing he's got an opportunity to go run a little bit more of a route tree out there now. So it's really an exciting development when you're talking about unlocking this role in a victory like this. It's not just unlocking a role in a single game. It's what does Sean Payton say all the time? Confidence is born from demonstrated ability. When you go out there and show that you can do it, you start to believe that yourself, like, man, I can do pretty much anything, right? So these players, they're seeing, they're believing, and now they're doing, and it's going to just, I think, be a snowball effect from this point.
Yeah, and I honestly don't think the Broncos need to use 3 backs. I think you use these 2 guys, and I think you get both of them comfortable. It doesn't matter who's in, right? But instead of just having a 3rd down back, have it be a luxury that any of these 2 guys can play in a 3rd down situation for you. And obviously that was the case at times, and obviously Monday Night Football. But I think J.K.'s role here, he's not going to be a guy that's probably going to get as involved in the passing game, though he did have, I think, 1 catch for 4 yards. One of those screenplays there. RJ has a chance to really kind of open things up a little bit. Whereas I look at JK as this guy's going to break off a couple of chunk runs. He's going to wear that defense down, and then it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Now you bring in RJ Harvey, who not only can impact you as a pass catcher with an expanded route tree, but you're also seeing a guy who's running through contact. And Sayre, I got some numbers that just going back and watching the tape got me feeling a little nicey here today, right? Let's go through. Obviously, shout out to our friends over there at True Media. RJ Harvey, these were his numbers against a 6-man box on Monday Night Football. Against a 6-man box, he had 3 carries for 22 yards. It's averaging around 7 yards per carry against a 6-man box. When you get to a 7-man box here, 4 carries for 23 yards. And here's the number that stands out as well. Even though he's facing some of those stacked box looks, he's averaging 5 yards after contact per rush against 6 and 7-man boxes, according to our friends over there at True Media. So he's got good vision. He's running through contact and getting extra yards. This is where I think that if J.K. Dobbins can wear some guys down and the Broncos open up some play action stuff and they're gashing them in the passing game the way that they had rhythm, and now you bring in RJ Harvey and it's just another guy you got to account for. This is the role that will help this offense kind of unlock, I think, a sense of sustainability throughout the rest of the season.
And speaking of unlocking roles, what you just mentioned, if the Broncos can really get play action going, we know that Bo Nix is extremely effective on play action, but also how much more effective now can Evan Ingram be in this offense if the Broncos are getting a lot of looks where he's kind of just running out there kind of wide open off play action. Like a lot of times we see tight ends coming from the opposite side of the formation. They come dragging across the field on play action. All of a sudden now you're hitting at least a couple of big chunk plays to a player like Evan Ingram every single week. And that's born out of that. And Troutman too. I mean, Troutman was making plays. We saw these guys doing things out there. So that's what I want to see going forward too, is how can you build on, now you've unlocked RJ Harvey's role. You had already unlocked J.K. Dobbins' role in this offense. How can you now unlock Evan Ingram based on these things, right? And I think they can work in tandem together. So I'm excited for this, Cody. It feels like a great launching off point for the Broncos. We understand the Bengals aren't world beaters on defense. They're not the best defense in the NFL. The Broncos were in control of this game for the majority of it, but at the same time, you know what? It's still it's an NFL game. Like, these guys are trying to win. These guys are paid to play. So you can't just take it with a grain of salt and say that it doesn't matter. I think that this is a huge launching off point for the offense overall.
Well, to your point about opening up the play action as well, according to NFL Next Gen stats for Bo Nix, he threw 14 of his 42 passing attempts on the run. So that's moving at 8+ miles an hour in the Broncos win over the Bengals, which was the second highest rate by any quarterback this season. So for him, it's like they even said, however, he completed only 7 of 14 passes for 88 yards. We saw the interception in the red zone. What do we see? Like, there's times where I think the design rollout throw on the run is workable. It's manageable for Bo. But where do we see Bo thrive? I think you can run play action, get him to set his feet and fire versus it just being boot action where he's rolling out. Do that fake there and stand in the pocket and then deliver. I think that's where the Broncos can have some bread and butter, and all these guys are going to get involved in the mix here. Broncos country, we love what we've seen from obviously RJ Harvey here, but we have not liked what we've seen from Luke Wattenberg. Is it time for the Broncos to replace their center for Alex Forsyth? We'll take a look at the reasons why that could be on the table here for the Broncos on today's episode of the show.
This episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breathwork, athletes, they sweat all the details. And Mazda, they bring the same intention to how they craft every single model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. And just like we talk about RJ Harvey finding his unique role in this game and Sean Payton sweating those details for his players, Mazda sweats every detail as well, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. It seems the time has officially come for the Denver Broncos to make a switch at the center position, but will they do it? Well, we're going to break down why they probably should on today's episode, Locked On Broncos here. But Broncos country, happy victory week to every one of you out there. We celebrate victories all throughout the course of the week. Got to enjoy them while you got them. Hey, we really appreciate all of you everyday listeners of the show as well. If you haven't done so, would really appreciate if you hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts as well as on YouTube. And let's talk about this, because even though there's the excitement of victory, absolutely, you celebrate all the wins, you got to look at some of the details from the game and figure out, all right, is there anything that's possibly preventing the Broncos from being a championship caliber team? Of course, penalties are a big reason why they may not be as good as everyone hoped before the start of the season. They got to clean that up. But in terms of starting personnel on offense, Cody, it does feel like starting center Luke Wattenberg, it's probably time for the Broncos to consider at least giving Alex Forsyth some reps, don't you think? I mean, what's your thought process behind this? What did you see on Monday Night Football? It just felt like Luke was struggling more than even normal out there in this particular game.
Yeah, I mean, so far this year, it looks like Luke Wattenberg has kind of been the weak link, the sore spot on the offensive line. When you're looking at the production, you're looking at where teams are attacking, you're looking at maybe some missed assignments. Like, it all kind of goes back to Luke Wattenberg being the one guy who's consistently making the most mistakes overall. And we're going to highlight the offensive line because they've been doing pretty well in a lot of other categories. You'll get that a little bit later here, but this is definitely the concern here. And Sayre, one of the things I saw here in this game in particular, and this has been a trend as well, when the Broncos have tried to run some of the screen plays to the tight ends or to the running backs, they've been called for an eligible man downfield several times. And Luke Wattenberg was the recipient of that, where maybe he's just not understanding the timing or the cadence needed to be able to block or chip release, because you're letting defensive linemen upfield. But then it's like, when do I release out, or am I getting upfield way too quickly? And it's like, you can't go past the line of scrimmage. And I even think this was an issue last year. I think the Broncos actually got away with one against Kansas City last year on the road at Arrowhead. I think Luke Wattenberg was the guy who got downfield on that one here. So actually, he wasn't even playing in that game. I think it was Alex Forsyth who got it, which now brings us to our next point here. I think from what the Broncos are trying to do offensively, dating back to last year, Alex Forsyth, I felt like was a better run blocker here. The run game looked more efficient for the Broncos inside when he was the center there. Of course, I don't think he's as strong as Luke Wattenberg. Like, Luke Wattenberg's bigger in that regard, but I think Alex has a good lower base to him. He's very strong at the anchor point, but he's also more agile, where I think he can get to those landmarks that the Broncos desperately need if they're trying to implement this wide zone scheme at times. He can get to that next level and get to a linebacker and seal him, whereas I just don't think Luke Wattenberg is fast enough. That's some of the concerns that I saw, obviously, here on Monday Night Football. What were some of the concerns you saw here with Wattenberg outside of the penalties?
I think one of the biggest concerns that I have is the fact that some of these snaps that are getting to Bo Nix are kind of being lofted up to him, almost like he's, catching a pass in a basketball game. He's like catching it up above his head. It's being like lofted up above, and he's catching some of them with one hand. I remember one play in particular, he threw a screen pass out to his left. He had to make like a one-handed catch on a lofted snap in order to just corral the ball and then quickly whip it out to his left. And thankfully, they were still able to make the play. But at the same time, Cody, I don't understand why that's been such a problem. I mean, we've pointed it out a number of times that some of these snaps are kind of being lofted slowly or inaccurately back to Bo Nix, and they're all happening when Wattenberg is in the lineup. And so I don't know if that's something that they work on during the week, or if it's something that just kind of happens over the course of a game and he just kind of has it's not necessarily the same as a catcher throwing the ball back to a pitcher, where it doesn't really matter what speed the ball gets there. Obviously, for your offensive operation to run at its highest efficiency, you've got to get the ball back to the quarterback accurately, just like in the punting phase of the game. If your long snapper is off with a punt and your punter's having to reach above his head to catch the ball, that becomes a liability over time. And the other thing that I noticed as well is when the Broncos did execute properly, getting the ball out perfectly on time, you whip the ball out to the left, bang. There was one play in particular, they set up a screen, I believe on 3rd and long to Marvin Mims, and you throw the screen pass out quickly, you get the ball to Marvin, and Luke Wattenberg is out there. He's not putting a hat on anybody. And I don't understand that either. I get maybe your timing is off on certain screens where you got to let the defensive line penetrate and get upfield. And then now you got everybody coming upfield. You try to beat them that way. But when you're supposed to get out in front and put a hat on somebody and you put a hat on nobody, that's the kind of stuff that really stands out in a negative way to me.
Yeah, and look, it's always about getting a hat on somebody. Like, that's the number one thing. If you got no work, you know what we always say, go find work. Like, that's the thing. Like, don't just wait for someone to come to you. You got to go find somebody, because Marvin or any running back or a tight end that's catching a screen pass, they're trying to read the blocks of the linemen that are getting downfield. Now, obviously, I think the Broncos perimeter blocking, a wide receiver, I think that's a really big strength of theirs right now. In particular, I think Troy's pretty good at it. I think even Marvin at times is good at it, even though he's a little undersized. When you talk about some of the DBs he has to block against, Cortland Sutton setting up a huge block for J.K. Dobbins late in this game, and then Pat Bryant being a very good blocker. Like, they're getting those guys that are on the perimeter blocking. They're doing a fantastic job. It is when you're trying to unlock something and your offensive line needs to get to that second level, you're just not seeing it consistently from Luke Wattenberg. And I'm curious as well. Like, nobody asked, we were on a conference call with Sean Payton, and nobody asked about Wattenberg. And I don't know if that's just because the Broncos, they won a game. And if you're winning, some things don't get brought up. They don't get talked about here. But I very much think, just from what we're seeing, I'm curious on what Luke Wattenberg has done. Because I'm sure if I asked Sean this, he would say he's doing well. Like that, Sean's not going to throw a player under the bus to the media. He's not going to talk about that in any way, shape, or form. But I am very curious internally. I'd kill to be a fly on the wall. So what conversations are being had with Zach Strief and Sean about the O-line here? And also, here's this point too. Guess who Bo Nix's college center was at Oregon? It was Alex Forsyth. They've got chemistry together. I think Forsyth is very, very smart for what he lacks, maybe in some physical strength or makeup in certain areas. This guy is a smart football player that understands the right angles to win. And I think he's played in this offense before, dating back at Oregon. I mean, now it's like, now you get a guy at center who can do those things. And in return, I think if you get better play from your center position, Sayre, it's going to make your guards and your tackle's job a lot easier. And I know Ben Powers has kind of been a little bit of an easy button punching bag. I think Ben Powers has actually played pretty solid this season for the most part. I think the struggles that we're seeing are all relative to the center position.
I would agree completely. And I think that can't be the case going forward. I mean, no. I know that not every roster is perfect. I know that not everybody has alternative options, but the Broncos actually have somebody who started games for them last year. I know you mentioned it earlier with the Kansas City game, but yeah, Luke Wattenberg missed some time last year due to injury. And I thought Alex Forsyth played pretty well. I know that he also is a punching bag for many Broncos fans because of that play against Kansas City. And, time heals all wounds, but we're still healing from that one a little bit. And I understand that. I understand that there's a little disdain towards him for that play on special teams, and a number of others that were kind of called out after the fact, right? But when it comes to playing the center position, it's not the same as field goal block. I mean, he did pretty darn well when he was asked to be the starting center last year. And like you said, you've got some great guards next to you. And that's why it's maybe a little shocking that Luke Wattenberg is struggling as much as he is, because you're playing next to Ben Powers and Quinn Miners, who are two of the best in the business. And so I think if any time there was to make a change, if we've seen enough at any point, it's got to be right now.
You know what the biggest challenge is going to be, and we're fixing to find out? Philadelphia on Sunday with that defensive line that they got with Jalen Carter right there. I guarantee you they're going to try to test Luke Wattenberg. I'm curious to see how he responds unless the Broncos do decide to make a change. And I think that's also the challenge as a coach is like, when do you know when to pull the plug on something? Like if the guy just doesn't have it, if the job is just not getting done at a consistent enough level, when do you pull the plug there? That's something I think that, they think of. And I also think at the same time, the coaching staff's hesitancy could be related to, okay, if we pull the plug here, there's no guarantee this next guy's going to come in and do even better. I think that there are just little things that Forsyth can do better that the offense will operate more efficiently with. And if Luke Wattenberg could somehow master some of these things that have impacted him, then I think he would be okay. But we haven't seen that, and it's been an issue dating back to the preseason here. Broncos Country, we're curious for your thoughts here on the Broncos offensive line. Should they maybe look at replacing Luke Wattenberg for Alex Forsyth? Make sure you sound off by letting us know your thoughts here today. But we are going to highlight the offensive line in a good way. Garett, Bolles, Mike McGlinchey, they are standing out in a big way so far through 4 weeks of the NFL season. We'll highlight the play of the Broncos offensive tackles here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season, it's finally here, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So maybe you want to get in on the action here for Week 5, Broncos against the Eagles. The Broncos are a pretty reasonable 4.5-point underdog on the road this week. So check out that action and a lot more. I love FanDuel because it gives you so many different ways to play. You can build parlays, you can try player props, even follow live lines during the games. Whether you're a casual fan or if you love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes game day, that experience, so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and download the FanDuel app today to get started. Today's show is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people, they can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to link all your accounts. They do it for you in minutes, and you can see the clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts in Monarch Money and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. You cancel those right away, saves you money every single month. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use Locked On NFL code at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code Locked On NFL.
As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we're going to highlight a positive about the Broncos offensive line, and that happens to be their tackle play. Just want to say thanks once again to everyone in Broncos Country, all the everydayers and first listeners out there. If you're not yet an everydayer and you're loving the conversation that you're getting so far on the Broncos, you're a brand new viewer or listener, hit that subscribe button for us so you never miss out on what's going on every single day, all year long. All right, Sayre, let's talk about it. We talked about maybe a negative aspect of what we've seen from the Broncos offensive line so far, but a highlight so far for them has been their offensive tackle play of Garett, Bolles, and Mike McGlinchey. And I'd say it's a little bit of a turnaround from what we saw in training camp from this unit specifically. I think, Garett's always been solid, but Mike McGlinchey was having some struggles in training camp, especially in some of the joint practices that they had against these other teams here. I think Mike has adjusted really well to what the Broncos' new outside zone scheme has been. But, I think from an athletic standpoint, as a pass protector, he's also been very good at being able to read guys well, block them down, and allow Bo time to escape outside the pocket. I've enjoyed what I've seen from these two tackles here for the Broncos, and Garett Bolles could be up for that defender of the year, or protector of the year, I think is what they call it, if he continues his strong level of play.
Yeah, Garrett's like, oh, they're giving out awards to the best offensive lineman nowadays. I'm about to turn it up for this season. I love it. I mean, these guys are burying people in the dirt. They are pancaking guys. They're getting out in space, making plays. That's what really stood out to me in this game too, Cody, is we see a lot more pulling this season from Garett, using that athleticism that he has had dating back to his amazing scouting combine in 2017 coming out of Utah. That athleticism has always been there for him. And so for him to be able to still playing at this level at the age of 33, shout out to all my geriatric millennials out there like me and Garett Bolles. But I love what we're seeing from him. Like I do. I love what we're seeing from Garett. And Ryan Fowler, he's actually a brand new colleague of mine over at Fansided, Cody. I don't know if you knew that, but Ryan Fowler's posted some love for our boy Garett Bolles. He said in 164 pass pro snaps this season, only 4 pressures allowed, 0 sacks, 2.4% pressure percentage, and a 91.9 pass pro effectiveness grade, which is the best among all offensive linemen in football. So shout out to Ryan Fowler for those numbers there, because ultimately, if Bolles can keep those numbers up, he is going to win that Protector of the Year award.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is about Garett too is just how his play has ascended year over year, right? When it was all dicey before he got his first ever contract extension, now he's gotten 2 contract extensions with the Broncos, and I think he has certainly earned it. And I think he's played better. Like, I think the concern as you get older, and Garett was an older prospect coming out of college anyways, your concern was, okay, what is your shelf life with a player like Garett? Garett is proving that as time goes on, he's actually aging like wine in terms of how he's playing. He's off to a great start so far. But, I mean, we're also seeing the Broncos do some things that I think are conducive to the success of this team, like going forward here. How many times, Sayre, in the last however many years you and I have been doing this together, have we been asking and begging for the Broncos to either pull their guards at times or pull the tackles out to the next level? We saw the Broncos get creative in a sense where on that 4th and 2 play against the Chargers, Sean Payton moved Garett Bolles all the way to the right side, not as someone who was on the line, but he was kind of like off the line. He was almost like a tight end or a wing essentially there, and they kind of faked the toss. They could run that toss play at some point. We could see it. Or here's what you could do, right? You could be in the shotgun here. You could have Garett there offset. You can run an inside handoff while bringing Bolles across the formation to kick out a guy on the outside. Like, you have flexibility here because you have 2 tackles who are pretty athletic and that can do those things that you want. I'm excited about this, but I'm also liking the fact that they're negating some pressure from some of the bigger pass rushers on the outside, like Trey Hendrickson. Probably one of the bright spots of this Bengals bad defense there. I never heard his name, never saw him called once really on Monday Night Football. And Mike McGlinchey absolutely pancaked him. The Broncos were putting bodies to the floor here on the football field on Monday night. And it started with the physicality and the tone set, I think, by guys like Garett and Mike.
That's what you and I had talked about going into this game as well, too, right? The fact that the offensive line kind of got pushed around a little bit against Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat back in week 1. And then, weeks 2 and 3, it was a tough battle that the Broncos, you felt like at the line of scrimmage, they were getting pushed back. I mean, Sean Payton talked about it frustrating at halftime against the Chargers. He's like, way too many negative plays. When you have way too many negative plays, it's not just because, well, your running back doesn't know where to go. Because obviously we see J.K. Dobbins, he's going to be able to find the holes no matter how small they are at this point. The O-line was kind of getting pushed around, and I think they took that Chargers game personal. I think they took the first 3 weeks personal. And, yeah, they should have. And absolutely, we saw against the Bengals that taking it personal and saying, you know what? We are one of the best offensive lines in the league. And they put some feet to those words because people have been ranking them high in all these categories: pass block efficiency, run block efficiency, pass block rating allowed, whatever new acronym we're coming up with this week. The O-line for the Denver Broncos has been ranked near the top of all these metrics. And you and I are sitting here saying, I don't know if it's been that good. And then against the Bengals, man, they come out and they do the thing. And it's the tackles, these 2 guys who are leaders of this team, veterans, elder statesmen of the team, whatever you want to call them. They went out and set the example at the highest level, and you love to see that, especially going into this game against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Well, that new acronym is the OLDBL, the offensive line destructive block rate is what we're going to see. We're going to go with that R. Yeah. But I mean, I have been impressed here. And look, to your point, like when we talk about the pressures allowed here, it really hasn't come on the outside. It really has kind of been that interior push at center and several times at guard there too. Like, and I think that's where, like, if Luke Wattenberg's struggling, I think Quinn Miners is going to struggle. I think Ben Powers is going to struggle because realistically, the center is the most important starting aspect of your offense in terms of you need to get the ball to your quarterback and you need to make sure that there's no interior gap penetration. Well, that has been coming in the A gap quite a bit here, where I look at Quinn and I look at Ben when they're moving and they're double teaming initially and their guy is peeling off to where they can let them go. They're peeking backside. They're doing their jobs, I think, from a communication standpoint, whereas we've seen Wattenberg kind of upended and put on the ground. Haven't seen Garett Bolles or Mike McGlinchey uprooted or put on the ground yet. So they've kind of been bright spots here. And if Denver can shore up that interior stuff, I think this offense will be a lot better here going forward, Sayre. And look, hopefully they can do that. Big test this week against Jalen Carter, Vic Fangio, and that Philadelphia Eagles defense that we know is tough as nails. If the Broncos can find a way to maybe bully them around a little bit and have some success against them, then I think the optimism and the conversations we're having about this team, Sayre, I think they change a little bit going forward here. Broncos Country, as always, we want to hear from you on today's episode of the show. Tell us your thoughts on what we've talked about so far in terms of the Broncos unlocking RJ Harvey's role, the Luke Wattenberg conversation, if he needs to be replaced, and what you think so far of Garett Bolles and Mike McGlinchey's play so far through 4 weeks of the NFL season. But that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. Broncos Country, tomorrow's episode, it is Crossover Thursday as we sit down and we talk with Locked On Eagles to preview Sunday's 11 a.m. Mountain Time kickoff. We'll see you then for another episode of the show.